Hi. If you're coming in, does everyone have a Lev Shalem book? It's called. Oh, thank you. You're handing them out. Yeah, thank you so much. I just look. We have an usher, so we're on top of it. Welcome, welcome, or privet, which means hello in Russian. We have a very special speaker tonight. He's Jacob Lassen, and he'll be introduced in a bit, but very excited that you're here for such a special Shabbat. We're going to have an abbreviated Kabbalat Shabbat, and we'll listen to a song, and then we're going to light candles, and then we'll have a full evening service. But this will give us extra time at the end so we can listen and ask questions to our featured speaker. And afterwards, I heard there is a wonderful, wonderful Kiddush. So thank you for that. And I also want a special, yes. Thank you to the Lassens for sponsoring the Kiddush. And one final thing, I guess, so that's nice. So when they get here, we'll say that again. If you guys notice the weekly, pay attention to how nice it is. I know Tina and Linda work really hard on it, and I just looked at it today and it was like really nice. So just want to give a special shout out for that. Okay, so we're going to start. I was looking for Jewish Russian music, and so someone and I participate in these email groups, and they recommended this song. You've got the lyrics. Does everyone have the lyrics on? It's called Charasho. It means for good. Baruch Hashem means blessed be God, literally, or blessed be the name. It means like thank God. And the song kind of cracked me up because it's like one of the lyrics is so how the kids, Baruch Hashem, which is like just what people say. So I thought it was very funny. Anyway, this is Benny Friedman. If anyone knows him, he's kind of a Hasidic pop singer. I'm a fan. Okay, so this is Chari's show, which means all is well in Russian.
Good morning. I hear my children laughing as they play. The trees start singing without a warning. It's gonna be a wonderful day. No patience for complaining. It's not all the bills like today. Cause even when it's sunshine, but it's raining. They sing and dance because they can't smile away. I think they're coming, but you keep on ringing. Or if you're, of course, that's not boy. It all sad and scary. There's a very special lesson to be learned. The sun is out and shining. You're acing everything you try to do. More than just a silver lining. It's a golden world created just the how of the kid. Behold the day of the and every note I think of you, I'm thinking of I chose love the boy. Oh, one blessing in my life for my ages high and wide. I show every hour, every day. The breath I have of you, only oh, love the boy.
Okay. Thanks. So now we will welcome in Shabbat. Now that we're musicality, I will welcome in Shabbat with the lighting of the candles. If you wish to light the candles with me, please come to the front and we can say the blessing together. We continue with the Mourner's Kaddish on page 30. Mourners, please rise. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah B'alma Divra Chirute v'yamlich Malchute B'chayechon uv'yamechon uv'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala uv'izman Kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Leolam Merach Leolam Omei Amaya Yit Barach v'yishtabach v'yit Pa'ar v'yit Roman v'yit Naseh V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'rechu le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Osei shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Please rise for the Baruch Hu on page 39. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vahed. Please be seated. Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim. Uma'avir yom u'mevi laila, umavdil ben yom uvein laila, Adonai tziva'ot shemo, El chai v'kayam tamid mimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai hamariv aravim. Continue on page 40. Avat olam Beit Yisrael amcha havta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shochveinu u'v'kumeinu nasiach bechukecha V'nizmach b'divrei Toratecha u'v'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu u'vahem neged yomam v'layla. Bavat kar alter simimenu leolamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev amo Yisrael. So we pause here for a moment. Some close their eyes, others put their hands over the eyes. The intention is to concentrate on a relationship with God's oneness. And we continue on page 41 for the Shema, and we say, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh Asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantan levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvleftecha v'aderech u'shokbecha uv'kumecha u'kshartam leod al yadecha v'hayu letotafo b'neinecha Uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. We continue individually on page 42. Vayom Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem v'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei bigdehem ledorotam v'natnu al tzitzit hakanfal petel v'techelet v'haya lachem letzitzit uraitem oto uzachartem ekol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam Velo taturu acharei levavchem acharei nechem asher atem zonim achareihem lema'an tizkeru v'asitem ekol mitzvotai v'hitem kedoshim le'elahechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihiot lechem le'elohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem emet. We continue on page 43b. You proclaim the covenant on the seventh day. You love this day we inherited, delighting in its remembrance. From the time you bestowed it, joy filled the hearts of Jeshurun, your people you redeemed. You exalted Shabbat as a sign between us forever. In 6 days your world was formed, and on the seventh day you rested. To honor your name, they sing songs of praise to the one deserving of praise. We continue on page 44. Umachuta b'ratzu kiblu aleihem, Moshe u'Miriam u'vnei Yisrael lachanu shira b'simcha rabba, ve'amru chulam mikal. Malchutecha ra'uvanecha, bokei yam lifnei Moshe, seili anu ve'amru. Vana emar ki far Adonai et Yaakov u'ga'olam yechazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai gal Yisrael. Page 45. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'ha'amidenu malkeinu l'chaim ufros aleinu sukkah shlomecha. Ushmort seitenu uvoinu l'chaim u'l'shalom me'atavi ad olam. Ufrotz aleinu sukat shlomecha, baruch ata Adonai, haporetz sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. Page 46. Please stand as you are able. V'shameru v'nei Yisrael, et ha-Shabbat. La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein v'nei Yisrael oti le'olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz uvayom ha-shevi'i shavat vayinafash ikadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah B'alma divrachirte v'yamlich machute b'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayedecho beit Yisrael bagala uvizman kariv imru Yesh merabah mevarach le'olam u'al me'amaya Yitbarach v'ishtabach v'yitbar v'yitraman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei nekudisha le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damidran be'alma v'imru. And then we continue with the silent Amida on page 47. If you are still praying, please continue to do so. The rest of us will rise in body or spirit as you are able. For on page 53, the repetition of the Amida. Vayichulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'kol tzevam vayichal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melakto asher asa vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melakto asher asa vayivarech Elohim et yom hashevi'i vayikadesh oto kivo shavat mikol melakto Asher bara Elohim lahaso. Please be seated. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanara El Elyon Konei Shamayim va'aretz Magen avod bidvaro, mechaye metim b'mamaro, ha'el hakadosh ein kamohu, haminiach le'amo b'yom shabbat kodsho. Kivam ratza lehaniach lahem, kivam ratza lehaniach lahem, lefanav navod b'yira v'fachad, V'nodei lishmo b'chol yom tamid me'on habrachot ha'odot Adon ha'shalom b'kaveh shabbat u'mvarech shevi u'meniach b'kedusha shnei ha'eg echer lemah sheets. Continue on page 54. Our God and God of our ancestors, embrace our rest. Make us holy through your mitzvot, and let Torah be our portion. Fill our lives with your goodness and gladden us with your deliverance. Purify our hearts to serve you truly. Adonai, our God, lovingly and willingly grant that we inherit your holy Shabbat, and that the people of Israel who make your name holy may find rest on this day. Baruch atah Adonai, who makes Shabbat holy. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrachir tev yamlich machute, b'chayachon v'yamechon uv'chaydachol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imeru. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach, le'olam u'me'almaya yitbarach. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitraman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalashem v'yitudisha. Amen. Called Shirata Tushkata Vanechemata Da'aman Bialma Viku. Tipa Slot Honu Va'uton, Dekol Yisrael Adam Avuhon Ve'imerum. Yehe Shlama Rabba Mishamaya, Vechaim Alenu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imerum. Ose Shalom Ramav Huya Ase Shalom. Alenu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Ve'imerum. Amen. We continue with the Aleinu on page 56. Aleinu Shabbat Lagnon Hakol Latet Kidula Liotzer Breshit Shelo Asanu Keharad Shelo Salanu Kemishpacha Adama Shelo Sam Chalkenu Kahem Aleinu kechol hamonam ve'anachnu shachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu notei shamayim ve'yosed aretz u'moshev yikaro b'shamayim imal ushkinatu zo Bigov he meromim, hu Eloheinu enod, emet malkeinu efesulato, kakatuv betorato, v'yadatayam v'hashivota elevavecha, ki Adonai hu ha-Elohim, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת, אין עוד, אין עוד. כך כתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד שמו. If you're mourning, please remain standing. We continue with the Mourner's Kaddish on page 58. This week, we lovingly remember Maxine Lichtenstein, Manfred Hess, Nathan Rosen, Jack B. Halfon, Solomon N. Betton, Seal Feinstein, Morris Hackle, Joan Heller, Elijah Drexler, Sally Gollum, Esther Mandelbaum, Ethel Center, and Pearl Hansen, who passed in recent days. We continue with the Mourner's Kaddish on page 58. It gadal v'it kadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divra chirute v'amlich machute, b'chayechon v'yamechon u'chaye techol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru, Yehi shmei rabbah mevarach le'alam olamei almaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yit pa'ar v'yit roman v'yit naseh v'yit adar v'yit ale v'yit alal shemei dekudisha le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. May the one who creates peace on high bring peace to us, to all of Israel, and to all who dwell on earth. And we say, Amen. And let's continue with Adon Olam on page 211. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra le'et nasa b'chefsa kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kiklot hakol levado yimloch nora ve'hu haya ve'hu hoveh Vehu iye batifara, vehu echad ve'en sheni, lahamshil lo lahachbira, bli reshit, bli tachlit, velo haoz ve'hamisra, vehu eli ve'chai goali, ve'tzorchev li be'etzara, Vehu nisi umanos li manakosi beyom ekra be'ado avkid ruchi be'et ishan ve'aira ve'im ruchi geviati Adonai li velo ira. So Shabbat Shalom, this ends the service. I hope I see you all here again tomorrow night is the beginning of Tisha B'Av. We will see a movie to help exit us from Shabbat. If you want to talk to me about that individually, happy to do that. And then Tisha B'Av services will start at sundown, like around 8, a little bit after 8. And hopefully you will come to one or both. Okay, and now I want to turn this over to Helene Lassen to introduce our speaker. And thank you so much again for sponsoring, the Lassen family for sponsoring the Kiddush, and to Tina and to Linda for such a beautiful weekly. Oh, go ahead.
All right, so Dr. Jacob Lassen, who I have no previous knowledge of before today, received his PhD from Yale University in Slavic literatures and cultures in 2019. His research focuses on the intersection of religion, politics, literature, and new media in Russia and the former Soviet Union. He's working on a book titled Sacred Sites, Russian Orthodox Cultural Politics Online. It explores how websites run by the Russian Orthodox Church and its allies reinterpret Russian culture to attract a new educated elite who support the church and the state. Starting at AFCLC, he was postdoctoral fellowships at the Havinghurst Center for Russian, Eurasian, and East European Studies at Miami University of Ohio, the Malikian Center for Russian, Eurasian, and East European Studies at Arizona State University, and the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard University, all of which are places that I moved with him. So we're glad to be here in a more permanent location. And today he's going to come and talk to all of you about Russian Jews, Soviet Jews, and Jews in Russia today. So with that, I give you Dr. Jacob Lassen, my husband.
Thank you, Helene. Welcome for being Boston. You already lived there. The other two she moved for. So thank you all for coming. Shabbat Shalom. The topic of Jews in Russia or the former Soviet Union is a broad one. It's a gigantic topic. You know, there's a history of Jewish people in the region that was controlled by either the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union or Russia today and the former Soviet states, going back over 1,000 years at this point. And so I'm going to focus in on mostly the Soviet period and a little bit of the post-Soviet period, and a couple of like interesting sort of moments within that especially. One thing that I want to kind of start with though is that in Russian, there are actually two different words for Jew and Jewish and that sort of thing. So the more common one you'll hear 90% of the time is Yevrei. It comes from the word for Hebrew, basically. And that refers to Jews as an ethnic group. It has nothing to do, necessarily with religion, but it does distinguish Jewish people in Russian-speaking areas from other ethnic groups. So, here we might say someone's a Russian Jew or a Polish Jew, but they would make a very strong distinction between a Russian and a Jew. So there's Yevrei, and then on the other hand, there's also Iudei, which is much more a religious term. Always refers to someone who practices Judaism, and kind of comes from the word Judea, for example. And so you have that distinction within the language and within how people think about things. So when I've been doing research in Russia, and people would ask about like kind of my background, and I would mention that I was a Yevrei, and they would then ask, well, are you a Catholic Yevrei? Are you a Protestant Yevrei? And so that kind of understanding of a very, very strong ethnic component to being Jewish versus it being kind of melded together with religion. So with that understanding in mind, the kind of the ways that it would affect your life every day in the Soviet Union were constant. So within a Soviet internal passport, which is like your ID card, everyone had listed, their name, where you lived, and there was something called the fifth paragraph or the fifth line, and that was your ethnicity. And you had to pick from a pre-approved list of ethnicities within the country that the government approved of. Jew was one of them. Russian was a different one, right? Kazakh, all these different groups. But when you were 16, if you, for example, had a Jewish mother and a Russian father, at the age of 16, when you got your first official passport for yourself, you had to make a choice. And that was permanent. You could never change that. And so how did this then affect people? Well, if you were someone who didn't have a choice, if both your parents were Jewish, for example, there was no question about what we put there in the fifth line. And every time you had to present that card, someone was going to see it. And that ended up being used to discriminate against Jews in a lot of different places, especially things like employment and admission to higher education. So even though the Soviet Union, right, had this ideology of being a totally egalitarian country that wanted to fight against kind of these national chauvinisms and distinctions, obviously the kinds of already existing prejudices were persistent. And as a result, there was still lots of discrimination. And we would see various waves of kind of official anti-Semitism throughout the Soviet Union. And one, probably the most important one to know about, is what's known as the doctor's plot. So in the early 1950s, Stalin was getting older, and he was getting more and more paranoid. And at that point, he basically cooked up in his head that there was a conspiracy of medical professionals, most of whom were Jewish or of some kind of Jewish extraction, who were trying to poison and kill him and other leading party figures. And so he starts like drumming up all this anti-Semitism against them. They start like preparing for show trials, and it was there was a big kind of foment of anti-Jewish sentiment around the country. There were some scholars who believe that actually this was the potential spark to mobilizing the Soviet population towards actions that could have led to basically another Holocaust. There are some records of plans being drawn up for mass deportations and other sorts of things, the creation of camps, more camps in Siberia to house Jews, for example. And then Stalin died, very luckily, and suddenly. So it didn't happen. So that was kind of a nice fortuitous moment. But this movement to kind of move Jews, especially eastward, was actually not a new thing for the Soviet Union, and didn't necessarily always have a fully negative connotation. So in the 1920s, 1930s, there was a great effort to populate the far eastern part of the Soviet Union, especially what is today Russia. So if you know, Russia, obviously very, very big, largest landmass on Earth, largest country on Earth by landmass. And when it was the Soviet Union, even bigger. And the population is very much concentrated in the first western third of the country. Once you get to the Ural Mountains, anything east of that, the population gets really, really tiny. And so there has always been this push to get people to move out east, to populate it, to develop it, and to shore up Russia's and the Soviet Union's claims on that land. And so in the late 1920s, there were a number of conversations about, we have all these Jews in this country, and Zionism is getting really, really popular. And a lot of them want to move to Israel. What are we going to do about this? We can't lose this huge portion of the population. It'll make us look bad. It'll, destroy local economies, that sort of thing. And we want to show an alternative, right? So if Zionism is a sort of, at least in the Soviet ideology, right, something from a nationalist, capitalist background, what's our socialist alternative? So there were a couple of different plans. One of them was to give Jews some land where they were already living, in what is now Ukraine, and basically cordon it off, create a kind of Jewish homeland in Ukraine. Some plans were actually in Crimea, so that's another bullet dodged, I guess. And so, various ideas there. But the problem was the population in place, the non-Jewish population in Ukraine, for example, was not going to be very happy if land was taken from them to then be given to Jews for a kind of Jewish homeland within the Soviet Union. So that was a non-starter. So the next best idea was, well, we have all this land out east that very few people are in and we need to develop. Why not send people out there? And so one of the great benefits of sending people out east also was that this was going to give Jews opportunities to take part in agriculture and farming. And it seems like, why would that be a big deal? But being able to kind of be connected to the land and have ownership and have a stake in working the land was actually a big motivating factor for a lot of Jews who were looking towards Zionism as an alternative. This idea that kind of helped to spur the kibbutz movement is something that a lot of Jews felt very strongly at the time, especially because They had been denied the opportunity to own land in a lot of Europe and to work land. That's why, you have a strong history of Jews working in, professions instead of working in agricultural work. So this was a way to get them more involved in kind of one of those very proletarian activities, and also to develop this area, and for a lot of the peoples that didn't like Jews so much in Europe, to move them out. So they picked this spot of land on the very, very, very far eastern part of Russia, right north of the Chinese border, near the Amur River. And in 1934, they declare that this little section of land that they've sent some Jews to will now become known as the Jewish Autonomous Oblast, right? So Russia has oblast, just means province. This was a special Jewish autonomous one that would have some independence in being able to set things like they had another official language. So aside from Russian, Yiddish is an official language there, and still is to this day. And so it allowed for this idea of a kind of alternative to Zionism. And when this was declared in 1934, it actually ended up having international appeal. So during the Great Depression, a lot of people had no other opportunities, nothing else that they thought would be possible, and didn't want to move to what's now Israel. And so as a result, it actually got some Americans, some South Americans, Canadians, and other Europeans to actually move there as well. The majority of the Jews that moved there moved to the capital. It's a city called Birobidzhan. It's in between two rivers, the Biro and the Bijan. That's why they named it that. And at its height, 45% of the city's population was Jewish, and about a quarter to maybe a third of the entire region's population was Jewish. There was never a majority. And so even though it's now been called the Jewish Autonomous Oblast now for 90 years, it never actually was a majority Jewish location. And the whole dream of getting a lot of people to move out there, to develop this land, to kind of settle Russia's wild east, never really came to fruition. Even though people, maybe people had some discrimination in their everyday lives, it was a lot better to remain where you were than to move all the way out there. The opportunities were very low, and they remain very low, unfortunately. And so it was, the alternative, the dream never really took flight. I should mention as well, the reason why Yiddish was chosen as the official language and not Hebrew is there was a very pointed reason to do this. Not only was it because there were more Yiddish speakers than Hebrew speakers at the time in the Soviet Union, but it was also because Yiddish was seen as the language of the Jewish proletariat, whereas Hebrew was, again, right, this nationalist, potentially bourgeois language. And so there was a very pointed idea of this is the alternative. And it remains, I think to this day, the only place on earth with a official language of Yiddish. So time goes on, the Soviet Union collapses. What happens to our Jewish autonomous bloc? It remains to this day, still is called that. It has a whopping Jewish population of barely 1% today. You still have to learn about Jewish holidays in this there. You're at a public school. They have some Jewish life. There is a Chabad rabbi who is there, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, but that's kind of the main aspect. People go there for tourism. The majority of Jews in the region move to Israel mostly. Some moved elsewhere, but what happens is that you see a majority moving out. So that there were no restrictions on immigration. And known as refusenikis, right? Refuseniks. They're the people who've been refused. And, they become this cause celeb around the world. American politicians and international groups, right, are starting to push for them, trying to get them to have the right to emigrate. And the Soviet Union starts to bend to some of this